It's illegal alien overload. I'm John Phillips, and this is After Hours. Promises of amnesty for kids has resulted in an insane, unprecedented flood of kids over the border. And in my mind, there's no question that this is a manufactured crisis created by the Obama White House. This train wreck has been a long time coming. President Obama promised amnesty to Latinos when he ran for president and knows that if he gets his way, he'll fundamentally transform the country into a left-wing mecca that will benefit the Democratic Party for generations. He only has one problem. The country doesn't want it. And every time a president tries to ram it through the Congress, Americans go nuts. If he had any hopes of passing comprehensive legislation this year, they evaporated with the loss of House Majority Leader Eric Cantor. Make no mistake, amnesty is dead in the water. But not so fast. Let's not forget the words of current Chicago Mayor and former White House Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel when he said, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." Well, what do you do when a good crisis doesn't fall into your lap? That's easy. You make one up. And that's exactly what the president did. He put the word out that he wasn't going to deport anyone, especially children. And when the world heard him, people listened. So now tens of thousands of children are coming to the country, but never fear. President Obama says we can solve this crisis by giving him amnesty, the amnesty that he's been looking for all along. Some children have died on their way to this country as pawns in President Obama's legislative battle with Republicans. He wants amnesty so much that he's willing to sacrifice the lives of other people's children to get it. And that is reprehensible. Here to kick this around is the After Hours panel. She's the host of the Tammy Bruce radio show, which you can get online at tammybruce.com. Tammy Bruce. He's a fair-minded civil rights defense attorney. You can get online at clearthecourt.com. Mr. Leo Terrell. And from his home studio in the great state of Texas, PJTV contributor and author of many political satire books, which are available at Amazon.com, Mr. Scott Ott. So, Tammy, let's start with you on this. Do you think I'm a conspiracy theorist here, or do you think this was a planned, coordinated attempt by this White House to create a crisis to get amnesty through the Congress?
If this was in the first months of 2009 and we didn't have the whole history of Barack Obama, I'd say we don't have enough information. But we've got 6 years now of this guy doing that sort of thing. And look, he's a good politician in that regard. But what you've said is correct. He's decided he can do this, and this is a great way to get what he wants. That's what Barack Obama does. At the same time, they're saying, well, it's because there's violence and drug abuse and horrible situations in South and Central America. That has been the case for decades. Everybody has known that that's been the case. We've had the same border situation also for decades. And for this to happen, and on the heels of Obamacare and the arguments about free health care in the country, on the heels of all these public pronunciations, not just from Obama, but from the Republicans as well, this angst about we've got to get this done, I also don't see the Republicans making any move to really stem this at all. Brewer and Perry are doing nothing at the border to stop it. I think that the political class, the establishment itself beyond Obama, wants this. They know the American people don't want it. They view us as just speed bumps on the road to what they see as being good for them politically and good for them financially.
I'll tell you what makes me think that I'm right about this, Leo. The fact that the White House just used the Bo Bergdahl situation to try to wipe the VA scandal off the front page of the newspaper. This is a White House that will attempt to change the news cycle to help their political situation or help them get whatever legislation that they want through the Congress.
You're a prisoner of the moment. Listen, John, listen, you guys are too smart to ignore that there was a guy right before Obama named President Bush who tried to get comprehensive immigration done.
And he failed.
Failed by his own party.
Sure.
So what does that tell you? The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, not really a good friend of the Democratic Party, have tried to push amnesty. But it's dead in the water because there's a core of Republicans, a small core Republicans that have locked up the House of Representatives. I would submit to you, John Phillips, Tammy Bruce, Scott Ott, that if the Republicans were allowed to vote without fear of being kicked out of office by the Tea Party, you would get some type of bill.
Well, let me
but it
ask
can't
you this
happen.
question. How about
it can't
this?
happen.
Kay Hagan is a Democrat running for re-election in
Yes,
North Carolina.
North Carolina,
Mark Begich is a Democrat running for re-election in Alaska. Those guys don't want to vote on amnesty, do they?
They don't want to vote on it because they're in red states. My point is this. Amnesty is poison. It was poison in the Bush administration. When was the last time we had an amnesty bill? Oh, back in 1986 with a Republican president.
Yes,
and it
Simpson
failed.
Mazzoli.
Right.
So you agree that this, in fact, with everything you've said, with people who want this to happen, it makes sense that these kids, that this is a construct, and that this is something that the establishment wants to have happen?
I agree with Tammy, but it's not just the Obama administration. There are people, the political establishment, who want this to happen.
Yeah.
But let's not become.
Sure, he's not alone.
He's not alone.
All right, Scott.
Well said, right? Good points.
Are these
He just obviously just agreed with me.
fair-minded
that entire
points?
time.
Very fair-minded.
There you go.
All right, Scott. Are these kids pawns in President Obama's game to try to get this legislation through the Congress?
Yes, but I think they're pawns in everybody's game. I was just thinking as you were introducing this episode that I thought, you know, before a couple of months ago, you hardly ever heard of a problem with kids unaccompanied coming in from across our southern border. I mean, every once in a while you hear of a truckload of people or whatever. But all of a sudden, we've got this sort of new phenomenon of mass numbers of children, some 52,000 maybe since last October, coming across the border. That's different. As Tammy said, the situation hasn't changed in Central America. It's been the same for decades. But you've got to start to look at the correlations between what has happened in American foreign policy, or at least the statements of our president with regard to foreign policy. That said, I don't understand, frankly, some of my colleagues, and I don't mean on this show, but some of my colleagues ideologically who are for free markets, but they're for locking down our borders. They're for smaller government. And yet somehow when it comes to immigration, they want more government. They want more involvement. They want to make sure that everybody goes through the proper process. You know, everywhere else in our life, we say that this U.S. federal government is a hopeless bureaucracy. But we're okay with casting new potential citizens into the arms of that hopeless bureaucracy.
Well, here's the difference,
I just think that
Scott.
there's a cognitive dissonance here.
Here's the difference. If we had a pure capitalist system in this country, I would be 110% with you. If you didn't pay your own bills and you didn't have a job and you couldn't make the rent, then you'd go back home and the problem would take care of itself. But when you live in a welfare state, when people come here and we pay for their health care and we pay for their food stamps and we pay for their education and we pay to keep them in prison if they break the law and we pay for housing vouchers and child care vouchers and everything else, then you don't have a situation that's a capitalist system. You have a welfare state. And the fact of the matter is that even a lot of these people that work, even these people that show up to work every morning and do the jobs that Americans won't do, they still don't make enough to pay their way. They're still taking freebies from the American taxpayers. And I don't think that's fair to stick them with that bill.
Well, and I think that's the place to attack it. And if conservatives, libertarians, Republicans want to go at it, the question really isn't one of so much of, you know, who we should let in or whatever. It is, why do we have a system that is no longer attracting just the kind of people who have made America great, but it's also attracting some people who know that if their own efforts are inadequate or if they don't want to make an effort, they can hang on because the taxpayers will take care of them. That's the approach to go after this, to say, look, let's make sure that the federal government hasn't become the sugar daddy that it has, so that people want to come to America because of opportunity, because they want to work hard, because they have the values that we all share.
Let's be honest about this. We know that these people are going to need a lot of help.
Yes.
Okay, you look at poverty numbers. Who's most likely to be impoverished? It's single women with children. Children in particular are most likely to be in this situation. When you look at the demographics of who's coming here, Leo, this latest wave, it's people under the age of 18. Mm-hmm. These people are going to need a lot of help.
Yes.
And the American taxpayers are going to pick up the tab.
Yes, but I'm pretty sure we all have heard that we are a country of immigrants. The ones who came over at Ellis Island, poor, dirt poor.
And
the
you know
Chinese who built the who
we
came
sent a lot of them back if they tested positive for disease.
I agree, but we're ignoring history. And you made a comment about a pure capitalist system. We never had a system, a pure capitalist system. We have a mixed economy with government regulation sprinkled in. We just can't cherry pick. But we have always open our doors.
Wait a minute.
to
Before the latest waves of immigration, though, you look at before Woodrow Wilson, we had a lot of people come over here. We didn't have welfare. We didn't have a lot of the social programs that we had. This was pre-New Deal.
Oh, I know, John, but remember that social plan that was developed by Roosevelt was to help Americans who were totally destroyed by the Great Depression. It wasn't designed to help immigrants. It was designed to help Americans who were out of work.
Another element here, though, too. You'll remember the Mariel boat lift out of Cuba.
Yes.
And one of the things that happened, and we wanted to get people free from that horrible situation in Cuba. Cuba was having an economic problem, and they wanted Cubans to leave. What Castro did, though, was he opened the prisons. And in those boat lifts were also a lot of their criminal class. And we found that out the hard way. Isn't it interesting? Because I don't think every kid in South and Central America has the swine flu. I don't think every kid has scabies. I don't think every kid has tuberculosis. And yet, the amount of sickness in wherever it is we're holding these kids, with the strange variety of sicknesses, I think one has to ask, if you've got parents who are willing to let kids do something they'd never done before, with the promise of free American health care, is it possible that we've got a volume of sick children deliberately coming here because of the nature of Obamacare? And I think we have to consider that at this point.
On that point, Scott Ott, I want to ask you a political question here. Let's go ahead and listen to Hillary Clinton, who surprised a lot of people by saying that these kids should be deported. Let's listen to Hillary in her own words.
They should be sent back as soon as it can be determined who responsible adults and their families are, because there are concerns about whether all of them can be sent back, but I think all of them who can be should be reunited with their families.
Okay, here's why this jumps out at me, Scott. Tammy brought up the Cuban boat lift that happened in, I believe it was the 70s or the 1980s. Bill Clinton at the time was governor of the state of Arkansas. Jimmy Carter was president, Democratic president from the South. Many of those people were sent to the state of Arkansas. At the time, Arkansas was a heavily Democratic state. Bill Clinton was in his first term as governor, running for re-election, and he lost his re-election bid in part because of this issue. His Republican opponent just beat him over the head with it. The voters there said, you know what? We don't want these people here. We never had a say-so in this. We never got to vote on this. And suddenly the entire state has changed. Hillary Clinton has been burned by this issue before, and she can see her presidential hopes getting burned by it again. Do you see that as well, Scott?
Well, I'd like to think that somebody who's running for, or maybe running for presidency of the United States, is actually motivated by principles, by the rule of law, by our Constitution. But I think you're right. I mean, Hillary Clinton. Sorry, this isn't a humor show, strictly speaking, is it? But yeah, Hillary Clinton's clearly motivated by politics and whatever will serve her well. And I think we also need to remember, again, I want to go back to the message that I think Republicans and conservatives and libertarians have been talking about the United States as a land of opportunity, about that Mariel boat lift not only brought over some problems, it brought over some of the finest citizens this country has ever seen, who started with nothing. I've got some friends who were living with like 11 people in a single room, and eventually they were able to buy their own house, and now they're running businesses and they're very successful at them. I think that's the story that Republicans need to tell. We want people who want to come here for opportunity, and we want to reform the immigration system to make it so that this is a refuge for the tired and the poor and the huddled masses yearning to breathe free.
Bravo, bravo. Hey, you should be looking at John's face. He disagreed. I agree with you, Scott. Right on point.
Here's the problem, though, too. We've seen when there can be a surge that can be organized. We've seen that the border without a wall it's a flood that's going to happen. There is no way we can address these. They figure now it might be 100,000 people by the end of the year. If we make no change physically at the border and allow most of these people to stay, what makes you think there isn't going to be 250,000 more in the first 6 months of 2015?
Here's something
it's
that's
out of
also
control.
different about this country. People who come here, and the immigrants that we want, people who want to become Americans, people who want to make it here, they want to own their own homes, like Scott was saying. But when you have the welfare state and you have all of these enticements that are on the table and that are being advertised, I mean, you look at some of the pamphlets that the Mexican government puts out, they advertise our social services here.
Yeah.
John,
We're becoming a flop house for the world's poor.
When you raise those arguments, you distract from the fundamental issue. There's 20 million illegal aliens. You're not going to take them back. We know that. So we need to sit down and say, look, we're going to somehow give them a path to citizenship 15 years from now. And we're going to, in exchange, tighten up the border. You get whatever Republicans what they want, whatever you want on the border. But you got to realize you're not going to kick those people back out of this country. 20 million? Where are they?
But and then there's option C, which is that Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie can adopt them all.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Hey,
possible.
that's an option.
They got enough money.
All right. I guess I get the last word this week. Scott Ott, you can buy his books at Amazon.com from
buying
his
them
home
next
studio in Texas. Although anytime there's a Texas backdrop, you expect to see that ball in downtown Dallas. We'll have to put the ball in that backdrop. Leo Terrell, a fair-minded civil rights defense attorney. You can get him online at clearthecourt.com. And Tammy Bruce, host of the Tammy Bruce radio show, available at tammybruce.com. If you'd like to comment on today's show, you can do so in the comment section below. For After Hours, I'm John Phillips. Thanks for watching.